Welcome to the WRAL Daily Download. I'm Elizabeth Holmes. A North Carolina attorney dared to be searched or even arrested in front of the state's Supreme Court justices while holding a baggie in his hand. In it was something that looked a lot like marijuana, which is illegal in North Carolina. But was it marijuana? Or was it just hemp, something that looks and smells just like marijuana and is legal? The confusion brings up ongoing legal issues about hemp legalization and what it means for law enforcement. WRAL state government reporter Will Doran has been covering this extensively and joins us now. Will, thanks for chatting with us today.
Nice to talk to you.
So walk us through this scene that played out in front of all 7 Supreme Court justices. What was the whole purpose of this?
Yeah, I have covered a lot of court cases in my time as a reporter at the trial court level and all the way up to the Supreme Court. You don't really see a lot of props being used, and you really don't see props where someone says, this could be drugs that I'm holding, your honors. Are you going to have me arrested for it? But that's what he did. He was essentially, because this case is all about we can't tell the difference between hemp and marijuana. And so he said, hey, there's a bunch of bailiffs, sheriffs sitting right in this room here. Come search me. Come search my bag. Arrest me. Say that I have marijuana. And the justices, their heads kind of snapped around. I mean, he really got their attention with this. But in the end, he thinks that he proved his point because he walked away free. He was not searched. He was not arrested. And that was kind of his point, that police are being overly aggressive on people who are not lawyers arguing in front of the state's highest court when they have this kind of substance in their possession.
Your reporting says that not even experienced law enforcement officers can tell the difference between this legal substance, hemp, and then the illegal substance, marijuana, very similar. And it even goes beyond them up to the state's crime lab. Exactly.
Both of these plants are from the cannabis family, and the only difference is just at the microscopic level, the amount of THC, the chemical whose long scientific name I can't pronounce, is in the plants. That's what gets you high. And if it has below a certain threshold, it's hemp. And if it has above a certain threshold, it's marijuana. But they look the same, they smell the same, and even, as you said, when it goes to the state crime lab, the scientists who we employ to answer the question of, is this drugs, can't tell because they don't have the equipment or the manpower to do it. And so you just, at every single level, from the police officer on the street to the forensics people in the lab, you've got no idea of whether or not this substance is legal or not, unless private labs get involved, which is expensive, and often at the taxpayers' behalf. We're the ones who ended up paying for those extra tests, and it creates this whole quandary that has, advocates leaning to saying that innocent people are being punished because of this mix-up.
Right. This essentially complicates how law enforcement goes about their searches. Let's say if they smell marijuana and suspects that someone may actually have it and be selling an illegal substance when it might not even be the case.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, for years, for decades, police have been able to say, I smelled marijuana. And that's all that they've needed to say as evidence that illegal activity, criminal activity is happening, to pull somebody over, to search their car, to, search their pockets, whatever. But now it's not 100% guaranteed that very distinctive smell that I think most people know is marijuana. It could be something that's totally legal. And so that is kind of what has led us to this point where now the state Supreme Court is stepping in for the first time to answer the question of, okay, how should the cops treat this?
So this attorney, Benjamin Cole, is pretty much saying that the inability to distinguish between the two can impact someone's civil liberties, right? Someone could essentially be searched and potentially arrested even if they are not committing a crime.
Correct. And not even potentially. The argument is that people are, and for years now, have been being searched and arrested when they have this perfectly legal substance on them because police can't tell the difference. And no one can tell the difference. And so he's saying that we need to stop allowing police so little oversight of how they engage in these searches and these arrests, that there needs to essentially be a higher bar. He's not saying that, police can no longer ever search people, but that, there has to be essentially something else. They have to be able to point to some other reason why they think a crime is actually being committed other than just the smell, because the smell alone doesn't tell you that a crime is being committed.
And hemp has been legal now for a few years. It was legalized back in 2019. Has there been a trend of people being arrested even though they're not breaking the law by having hemp?
There has been, according to attorneys I've talked to users that I've talked to people who work in the hemp industry. And we've seen it even recently. Sheriffs will go into a local store and, arrest the people who are selling hemp products and saying, we think this is actually marijuana. And they say, well, it says on the packaging that it's not marijuana, and what are we going to do about that? And so, and also just individual people. I've talked to lawyers who have said that they have plenty of clients who say that they had hemp and got arrested, got charged, got a permanent criminal record for these charges, and then had to hire them, spend hundreds or thousands of dollars hiring an attorney, taking time off of work, go to court to fight this. And then it eventually does get tested by the private lab, and it turns out, oh yeah, it is hemp, and the charges just get dropped.
It seems like this also kind of puts the onus on law enforcement to determine, okay, is this hemp? Is it marijuana? Do we have enough to search someone? It seems like there's no barometer for, okay, this is when we actually double down and do a search.
Right. Well, the state's argument is that there shouldn't be any onus on the law enforcement to do that should be what the courts are for, that, you do hire your lawyer or get a public defender appointed for you if you can't afford a lawyer, and you go to trial and you figure this all out. But the other side says, well, that's not fair. There should be some onus on police to have at least a little bit of evidence pointing in the direction of criminal activity. So it's really that push and pull of, whose responsibility is it? Is it the police at the very first interaction, or is it later on in the trial system?
And your reporting has said that even if it does make it to the court system and someone is found not guilty of having an illegal substance, that can still hurt people.
Exactly. You could still be arrested and spend days, weeks, months in jail, depending on, how high your bail gets set. And if you can afford that, that could cause you to lose a job. It could cause you to lose custody of your kids. If you're already on probation for something else, simply being arrested could be a violation of your probation. So even if you're later found not guilty or have your charges dismissed, you could still go back to prison. So there's a lot of really real consequences for people who could get caught up in this, even if they're not actually breaking the law.
The lawyer for the state, Zachary Dunn, said that putting any kind of extra rules on these searches would essentially create a free pass for drug dealers. He went as far as to say that even if you had proof of purchase, like a receipt of something legal, that would not be enough. What was the response to that? Tell us about that.
Yeah, this was in a series of questions with the justices. They were asking about this. Okay, what if someone, driving around gets pulled over because the officer smelled something and they, show them the receipt. Hey, this is, legal hemp. I just bought it at the store. Well, he said, well, all that's going to do is give a free pass to drug dealers that, you have 10 pounds of weed in your trunk, but then you also go to the hemp store, buy a little baggie of hemp. And when you get pulled over, say, oh, look, here's my receipt. It's legal hemp. You can't search my car. And which is a fair point and a good point. And that's really the tricky part of this is, both sides have good points that they can point to and say, well, imagine if the other side wins, how this is going to be bad for me. And both the police have those points and also the civil liberties advocates have those points as well. So that really is what makes this so tricky and why we need the Supreme Court to now step in and decide essentially which side gets to win.
At the end of the day, this really seems like the question is, why is hemp legal if it's creating all of these problems? And something that you and I talked about before we even started podcasting was this something that they thought would even happen? And you said yes. Yes.
This is not a surprise to anyone. Back when the legislature was debating hemp legalization, this was 2018, 2019, the State Bureau of Investigation came out and wrote a memo that said, police will lose their probable cause to arrest people if you do this because of all of the things that you and I have just been talking about on this podcast, because of the differences or the lack of differences in smell and odor and all of these legal questions about the Fourth Amendment and people's rights. I mean, exactly all of this was laid out in black and white on this memo that the State Bureau of Investigation, our main state law enforcement agency, handed out to lawmakers. And they looked at that and said, well, okay, we're just going to do it anyways because we think that there is political will behind this. And, honestly, if you look at polling, most people even want marijuana to be legalized. And certainly there's a much larger portion who want hemp to be legalized. But also just for the economic factors of it, too. North Carolina is historically a tobacco state, and tobacco has been not doing so hot in the markets recently. And so farmers needed something to shift to, and hemp was an emerging market that a lot of farmers have shifted to. It's really big for rural areas.
I guess, what are the next steps with this case? What are you going to be looking out for?
Well, the justices didn't issue a ruling from the bench. They never do that. They're going to take this under consideration, and we don't know how quickly they could issue a ruling. It usually takes at least a couple of months and sometimes longer. So we'll just be waiting on pins and needles for a decision on this, as will millions of North Carolinians who work in law enforcement or who use hemp or who have family members who do or who are drug dealers, seeing if any new rules come out that they can take advantage of.
All right. It'll just be a waiting game, it seems.
It will.
All right. Well, Will, thank you so much for joining us. And thank you for listening to the WRAL Daily Download. If you've listened to this podcast on WRAL or the WRAL News app, you can also find it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere you listen to podcasts. Follow the show so you don't miss an episode.